Uh, let's roll right into what's happening in the news. Okay, so uh, this week I would love to start on the story that is the updating uh, cyberpunk bugs issue, where they basically have elaborated on. There's a Forbes report that came out that says Cyberpunk 2077. A big part of what happened on that project, what went wrong, was that the QA company, Quantic Labs, lied to them about their capabilities and overall did not find all the things that people ended up finding when the game went live, and essentially the game went through submission dirty. Is what it
Great.
sounds like. So this story now, when we talk about, especially when I talk about a lot of the things that go wrong in QA, when you're finding things and you're getting shut down from the devs, you're getting shut down by producers, and overall there's a time crunch. We talk about a database full of things that are will not fix. A lot of the times, I'm absolutely referring to when you have a team that is good, that knows what they're doing, and is pretty solid at their jobs. This is basically what I ended up having towards the later years in QA. I was fortunate enough to work with some really great people that were talented in at Square for those years and at IDOS. And when I was doing mainly like the compliance focused stuff, when I could kind of pick people that I knew were like solid at these tasks, it was very it was a very efficient time, and you kind of don't always have that. When I read the bullet points about what went wrong here, it's all too familiar and all too believable and all too real, considering what outsourcing used to be like and how it felt when I first started in those early years. So I got a lot of messages from people after this story, basically, where they're saying, "Hey, does this sound credible to you?" Because it certainly sounds like they're deflecting, and there is,
It does sound that way.
and I'll tell you this: it feels to me when I look at this list that there is absolutely some deflection in here, in the sense that uh, what a studio working on a large project is doing pretty much all the time, unless they're like completely fucking it up, is they have in-house testers as well to focus on the feel of the game and mainline progression things that are going to be not outsourced, that are in charge of seeing how the flow of things go. Um, those people are essential. You're going to have a team of, it depends on the size of the company, but whatever the case is, um, if you're managing things well, you're going to always have people in house keeping that, keeping their main task to playthroughs, getting through it, catching things on the way, and feeling how it is to go through it and running into issues here and there. If you're not managing it well, those people are going to be spending less time on the controller and more time managing the outsourcing that's going on, and they'll have very little time to actually sit down and play the thing. Um, so there is some deflection in that angle. However, I also have seen, and I was looking at the replies to some of this news coming out from Forbes, and I saw a bunch of people that were noting that they're like, well, for all the stuff that people recorded and all the crazy shit we saw tweets about, I played it and I didn't see any bugs, or I didn't have a run through that was that bad. Yeah, some people did manage to get through the game without seeing that crazy shit. I mean, again, they didn't say what platforms, obviously, but I assume that would
Yeah.
make a huge difference. Um,
I find that to be unbelievable
the
that people manage to complete the entire game without seeing much of the crazy shit.
the feeling I got from the way people were tweeting out every other day about how bad it was getting makes it feel like it was impossible. But I'm not gonna just yell and say everyone's like full of shit or whatever. I mean, it's possible,
No,
right?
I find that the very blunt use of the word incredible, and that I do not particularly find that very credible.
I mean, if anything, it's just probably um, lends credence to the fact that like the game is built in such a way that there's enough random variables each time it's loading in an area that you're going to you're going to have times where it runs fine and times where it doesn't, based on small little things that are even harder to notice. But all this is preamble. The point is that the things they listed that Quantic Labs was responsible for fucking up, which is one, for example, they over exaggerated the size of their team on Cyberpunk in order to keep the contract. 1000% real. That absolutely happens. And working at an outsourcing company and watching the competition as well also outbid each other for contracts and try to figure out how to, offer the most competitive rates and such. They will totally just lie about what their capabilities are, and they will bullshit their way through those numbers almost every time. That is a real thing.
So, yeah, that is a real thing.
That's a real thing. Now, what ends up happening in many cases is you'll take I mean, it depends on what they do, but they'll do things like, oh yeah, we've got like 20 localization testers, each in groups of 3 dedicated to their languages, and then they occasionally on a low date will be like, oh, and they can switch over to functionality testing when there's nothing coming in for localization. They'll be like, oh yeah, those are considered full-time testers as well. We're going to put that number in, and it's like, that's not true. Those are not full-time testers. They're not trained to do full-time testing. They're not trained to complete functionality in that way. They're just incidental eyeballs on the game. But you'll put those numbers in. You'll do things like take people who are trainees, that are cutting their teeth on like how to test and how to write bugs to begin with, and say that, oh yeah, that's man hours on the project. As long as there's an ass in a seat holding a controller. Some of these outsourcing places will absolutely do that.
What about a situation where, okay, so what you're saying is, hey, we got 200 guys that can work on this, but actually, in reality, we have 100 who would actually be putting real time into it. And then the project comes down and Boss Man says, wow, we're spinning a lot of plates and that other project's taking a lot. So this team actually gets 70. And now you're at like a third of what your original estimate was according to the dev contract.
So, I mean, what'll happen is at the start of a week, you'll promise X man hours. And then at the end of the week, you will deliver on those man hours. However you get them, you get them, whether it consists of throwing overtime on grave shifts, dead shifts, grabbing localization testers, grabbing new recruits, whatever the case is, you're going to deliver a thing that says, oh yeah, we put 65 man hours into the game this week.
So what you're saying, hold on, let me try and break this down into a version I can understand, like a more concrete one. You go, hey, we need 100 hours of work on this. And they go, shit. Well, if we let these 5 guys sleep at their desk with the game on, that's 40 extra hours. That'll kick us up over the number.
If you lied about your team size to begin with, and you don't have the capability of delivering on the numbers that have been set in the evaluation of the project, then you're good. Then absolutely anything and everything that can be done will be done to exaggerate that time. Now, the other things that they list here go hand in hand, where you're talking about, they said that their team's made up of senior staff, but it was instead juniors with under 6 months of experience in QA. I've seen that happen.
Oh man, that's not the same.
I've seen that happen, and I've seen that lead to a road where, as a project gets more complex, the people with the most experience spend their time being mini managers over the teams instead of actually spending their time on controller. And that's a huge problem as well, because some of the most talented testers, people who are great at finding shit and just thinking outside the box and be like, oh, what if I just did this in that way? Or I see something, a lot of the time, something will pop up in a game that you're like, yeah, let me investigate that. You might not always, it might not occur to everybody to go investigate something that looks like it might be a little bit odd. But
You
if
get a
you're,
certain bizarre intuitive thought process on how these things work, or more importantly, how they break.
yeah, so for example, I noticed that some messages in Elden Ring disappear when you press X, while others disappear when you press triangle, right? Completely mild thing that most people probably just press and go, oh, and then press the other button. No big deal. That alarm bells went off in my head and made me go, if I were in charge of this, I would dedicate a week to figuring out what's going on with exactly that nature, why the two are different, and what can go wrong as a result of that. Right? What would happen if you created a prompt that needed one button to go away and then found another person who had a different prompt with a different button to go away and then caused them to overlap? Right? There's a million things to create from just seeing a moment and going like, oh, that's a weird little decision that's inconsistent, and you have to like you have an intuition towards going, let me investigate that. People who are good at it will have that. People who are not will not, and so they'll like the people who are good but they don't have the time because they're managing a crew or telling people like they're checking bugs, they're vetting things, etc., handling some regression in some cases. It's not going to be the same as having actual experienced testers holding controllers.
I mean, at the end of the day, part of this is the nature of outsourcing such an important part of your project to somebody that you don't actually know or see. The equivalent of, you asked your neighbor to help build something, build something like a new fence, and instead of going out in your backyard and actually looking at the fence being built, you call them on the phone and go, how's the fence coming along? And they go, great. And then you walk into your backyard a year later and there's just a pit in the ground and go, what are you doing?
Now, sometimes your fence turns out great. Depends on who you're
Sometimes.
talking with, right? And just in this city alone, back in those days, I mean, a number of places popped up that were like, competitor to the place I was working. There was Babel, there was VMC, Volt, there was Test Track, and all these different places that popped up that essentially were these third party studios, and you'd see them usually get credited, sometimes invisibly, sometimes like in a minor way, but without the individual testers getting their thing. But you'll see some names pop up, and some of these places, especially when they were stepping in, creating a new, like I remember the era when some new ones had opened up and they were trying to compete. So essentially, their game was to more or less like try to get a few major testers over, do some poaching, and then get a bunch of new people in and start cutting into the business of the established like third party studio right away with competitive rates. Now, competitive rates is always going to be very attractive to a project that's trying to come in under budget. So when you offer a better rate for the same amount of man hours, they're going to seriously consider it, And if it's a big enough game, they might come visit the studio, do a walkthrough, take a look and see like, okay, yeah, how's the security? How's this? How's that? And then they might even give you a pilot project and go, okay, work on this small thing for us and let's see how you guys do. And in those pilot project cases, I guarantee you they take the best testers off of every project, put them all on this pilot, and they create an all-star team. They create a fucking Globetrotters list. I've been on those teams of Globetrotters to just destroy a small thing and give the best possible impression, which then often lands them the big contract.
So I'll be scrolling through TikTok, and there's a lot of little cultural parts of the world that I see via, I accidentally fell into this brand of TikTok or whatever. And like, I don't know what the algorithm decided I needed to see, but I fell into electrician and construction TikTok. And of note to this conversation is that people working on the same project who don't have the same job can fucking hate each other because they're the actual important ones. And so there's no respect between the drywall guys and the electricians. But more importantly than that is a video I see over and over and over and over, which is guys videotaping them doing work. And it is with the text, yeah, well, my buddy says he can do it for half the price. And the response is, great, you can pay that and my full fee when I have to come over and completely demolish the shitty work they did and then do my stuff from scratch.
Yep.
Because they're going to do garbage.
Projects sometimes would show up for an irregular amount of days because there was a salvaging that needed to be done because they didn't trust the place that they were currently contracted to after a certain amount of time. So all this to say that the fact that there are outsourcing problems that do totally exist out there, again, it's not always, but it's some places, especially if they're...
I just saw the succinct explanation of this in the chat. Buy cheap, buy twice.
Sure. Yep. If the places that are offering the best rates are also not focused on the best kind of hiring, if they've got a hiring that essentially is, again, like, people that are coming in that are not really well suited for this type of thing, but they get through it anyway, then this leads to this type of result, and then that result leads to the negativity that we then go on to see when I tell you the stories about devs who are upset and treating testers like shit and making snarky comments and all that bullshit. Sometimes it's because they're assholes, and sometimes it's because they've worked with bad teams they don't trust, and so they're now naturally just afraid of whatever is outsourced, and they don't really want to give them the time of day. Now, if you get brought in on a hit squad, which is the, like, okay, we're going to take your testers and send them literally to the office, and you work at the studio, that'll often be a better impression, and you can talk to them directly and make sure that you're on top of this shit. But there's still these policies they put in place, especially when it all starts with the contract being a lie to begin with. And once that domino is hit and the rest are falling into place and you're covering your bases, you're not delivering an accurate amount of man hours, but you claim to be, well, then it's like, okay, well, hold on a minute. If you're not delivering the right amount of man hours, or if you're faking it or whatever's happening, then what's happening in the database? What's the kind of reporting that we're seeing?
Well, we're filling it up with garbage F-class bugs that fucking don't matter, and we're just redoing the same ones in different areas, even though it would only take one thing to fix, and we're just filling it up with the most banal shit we can find as fast as possible, because you want to see a lot of bugs in your database, right?
More precisely, Quantic Labs had a daily quota of reported bugs, which led to CD Projekt not getting thousands of relatively pointless bugs from testers, which took up a lot of time, caused the game-breaking issues to not be found and prioritized. So this gets to another thing that, on a personal level, I've seen this fight happen inside of every office I've worked at, and it's the idea of the bug quota, and it's the idea of, and it goes hand in hand with other money-saving techniques. But to start it out, it is when you come in, you punch in, you sit down. Before you leave today, I need to see X number of bugs from you today. No matter what happens, you don't get you better have 10 bugs in before the end of the day, right? And now you have a number that is going to massively disincentivize people actually digging and finding anything, and heavily incentivize just getting whatever the fuck they can out of the way, and in some cases, like, fighting over issues with each other or splitting them, and things like that, where, like, a whole lot of nothing occurs, but maybe we can turn, like, you'll see something that bad testers will do is they'll find one bug and then they'll like, try to create 3 bugs out of the same one, in a way, where it's like
different circumstances
or things. Once the first bug occurs, there's 3 or 4 things that occur afterwards that are all more or less the same. The textures are off on something or whatever the case is. This results in that same texture being off on this other piece of clothing, whatever, and then it's like you write up a second bug for that. It's like, well, no, that's not a second bug. It's the same one. If the textures being off leads to the game fucking crashing and you losing your save, well then compliance steps in and goes, okay, this gets upgraded to that type of thing. So you need
Yeah.
to, from a compliance point of view, it's important to make sure that things always don't lead to a new classification of failure. But on a regular functionality side of things, that'll happen sometimes, and you'll just see people padding out their daily quotas. Um, it goes without saying that sucks. It's not
Yeah,
a
well, I
good
mean,
way to.
Wooly, I'm just sitting here going like, well, what happens if I know I have 10 bugs a day for my week, and I'm going to be working 5 days this week, and I find 34 bugs in day one. Does this not incentivize me to write up 10 and then save 10 for tomorrow
You
and then
bet.
save 10 for the day after?
You bet your fucking ass it does. And 34 bugs right off the bat will indicate instantly how bad things can get. But sometimes if you're not swimming in it, you'll just be like, "Yep, cool, done for the week," you know. And in other cases, it'll just be like, "Can I find a text error somewhere?" I'm sure whatever the case is, there are people who unfortunately will just that as a result of this shitty quota system, just not do as solid a job covering things as they could. It all works against the results of the game and the shape that it ends up shipping in.
Well,
And then you put another factor into this in place in certain places where testers that are not hired full time are hired in on contract, and they're on contract for day-to-day calls to see whether they're in or not, or week-to-week calls.
so
And
your personal hour-to-hour performance is now vital.
yeah, well, things originally were such that you would get hired and you were a part of the company and you worked on whatever was in according to their needs and what was flowing through. Eventually, that became something where they're like, we're going to hire less people, or rather, we're going to hire way less people full time and way more people part time, and offer them, again, sometimes partial days, sometimes full days, but whatever they're getting is based on the projects in. And when the projects are done, sorry, no time, no use for you, go home. Eventually, that became on a day-to-day basis. You'll find out what you're doing, and then once it's on a day-to-day basis, where you're expecting a call every morning to see whether you're going to get work today or not, kind of like waiting to go pick strawberries on a farm. There's going to be a step where it's like, well, how many strawberries did you pick yesterday? And if you're somebody who's
Why
like,
can't you pick that many today?
if that quota comes down and you're in a day-to-day system where the quota is also going to determine the likelihood that you're going to be found the next day, you are now double incentivizing people to just find nonsense
One of
and
the
flood
best
it.
pieces of advice I ever received that never applied to me because I never worked in a corporate setting is never give 100%, because if you give 100%, they're going to expect 100% every single fucking day of your life.
I've heard multiple people say that. Yeah. So this is all to just give another perspective on reading about this story and what we're seeing here, where, make no mistake, deflection is occurring, and make no mistake, there's absolutely stuff that internally should have been happening for that game to release the state. For that game to have come out in the state that it's in. And I think an indicator of that, which of course these are private documents, you'd never see them, but the reports after submission and how big they are, how many pages they are, would be a high indicator of, how Sony, Microsoft, and how they felt about these games and when they took a look at what they found. And if they got back fucking 10-page reports as opposed to like 2 or so, then that's a high indicator, a very clear indicator that things are really rough. Maybe you should add some time to this. But all this to say, on the other side of things, someone walks in, has a quota, and wants to put in those 10 bucks so that they get called back to have a job the next day. You're gonna get shit quality, especially if they're in their first 6 months and they're being, and then they're pulling in these projects that need experience, time, and like real man hours being reported.
So there's kind of a fucked if you do, fucked if you don't here, because let's say we're hiring a company that has padded its original numbers, right? It's padded the amount of people that are going to be there. It's padded the amount of work hours on it, right? What are you actually supposed to do with the quota? Let's take the quota that most people are going to be familiar with and hate with every fiber of their motherfucking being, present almost everywhere in North America, which is the fucking speeding ticket quota.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You send two guys out, and you're gonna say you're gonna cover this neighborhood, and I want 100 speeding tickets by the end of the week. Why? Well, if you don't give them a quota at all, they're just gonna park the car behind the Wendy's and blow each other every day, and you're gonna get 3 tickets when somebody crashes the car into the Wendy's. So you give them the fucking quota. So what do? They invent 99 cases of speeding on Monday and go back to blowing each other behind the Wendy's from Tuesday to Friday. There's no fucking solution if they're jackasses and they want to waste their time.
Not to mention the fact that towards the end of the month, suddenly things get way stupider and crazier and worse because they're running up against the date.
Be careful driving from the fucking 25th to the 30th.
Because time's running out.
When guys have been fucking sleeping in their car for 20 days for their whole shift, going, shit, I got 300 tickets to write by tomorrow. Guess your fucking turn signal's broken. Smash.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, I've watched things like this happen on projects that are like smaller in scale, and I've watched things like this happen on projects that are like massive open world ones, and obviously those are the ones that are going to suffer the most. So yeah, Cyberpunk is the kind of game that, you know, you can't be fucking around with. Basically, there's shitty studios and there's better testing studios, and you can't be fucking around with shitty ones on a game of this size, scope, and I guess like so much brand new shit is being put down. Like it's built off of The Witcher 3's engine, right? But it's a completely different thing. You don't have a lot of reference to go off of on previous entries and such. So, you if you signed up with and contracted in a studio that is just one of those shitty ones, this is a very possible viable explanation for what happened there. But
now I will say,
but it does not make it make sense that their own internal team would have been going through it and saying looks clean to us.
Yeah, no, come on.
That doesn't make any sense.
Hey, I will say one thing in the defense of both this I will say one thing in the defense of this QA team and the CD Projekt devs that were on this, that a complete and total management and technological failure resulting in issues of capital, trust, lying, and management is very Cyberpunk.
It is on brand. It is very, very on brand. Yeah. I've said it, and I just wish I could look at the databases of these projects, because like I feel like I could reach my fingers into the water. Dude, and just like close my eyes and just feel and go like, okay, the whole history is coming back to me. Like I can whisper, dude, if I can touch a database and just sit there and look at it with thousands of bugs in it, I can feel the whole history of the project and how it came about.
Like I've been in this place ever since I spoke to somebody who used to work at Bethesda a couple of years ago. And I was in this spot of like, dude, I would give one of my fingers to get unrestricted access to what their database looks like before the project gets shipped. I would kill to see what it looks like.
Yeah. You sort by WNFs, you take a look at what's happening, then you immediately create a new column, sort by comments in the discussion tab, and see the highest number of comments back and forth over an issue, and find out how many people were like arguing in the middle of this bug over whatever was happening, and go see how it was resolved. That'll teach you everything about it, you know? But all this to say, yes, if you're looking for the opinion of someone who's done this a little bit and has seen it um, on both sides here, there absolutely are shoddy QA companies. There absolutely are shoddy QA teams that are overstepping their capability for better contracts.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm just thinking. I'm just thinking. You're talking about like the comment thread,
mm-hmm.
and I'm just thinking of like, okay, this bug, whatever, B class, blah blah blah. The comment from the original tester, and then the response by programmer X that says this isn't a bug. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah, no, that's or like we are even again the more vindictive and snarky ones over time. Like it sucks. But that's exactly it, and it's yeah. If you just get hired your first time, you just cut your teeth on whatever shitty fucking game they were using to teach you how to test bugs. I don't know, for example, Championship Manager, and
What?
you're learning about how to enter bugs into a database from a goddamn glorified Excel sheet, and then they go, "Cool, you've done 3 days of training, you're ready to go." And then the first thing you do is sit down on Cyberpunk. Like, boy, are you fucking in over your head and not aware of how to do anything in that kind of circumstance and how to test proper. Like you're missing so much.
Nah,
Um,
man. Man hours. All our people are fucking legit. The rock stars. The
there's not
superstars.
there's not always a small project or small like mobile department to like go figure out and cut your teeth on in all these cases, but um, I will say this: like the studios that are full of shit in the third party world don't tend to last very long, um, unless they get acquired or bought out. Which Keywords was certainly doing for quite a time. But like some of the shittier ones popped up and then just disappeared. Because there's a
Worked
bit of
on
a
2, 3 projects, and they all came out in fucking mess. And
a little bit of that like telemarketing world of like someone who's been running the scam at a bigger place says I can fucking get 10 guys and 10 phones and sit
and
in an
then you're
office.
working there, and your fucking piece of shit, fucking scumbag, motherfucking supervisor who tells you to fucking rob everyone, just fucking quits one day for no reason, and that is your fucking sign to just start running. Because he fucking feels it coming down.
I mean, there's a countdown from the moment he walks out to the till the gas canisters are coming through the
That
windows.
is my experience. When that fucking guy leaves, it's fucking time to just walk out and just leave and never come back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. I've certainly been on both sides of that, and like, there's times when, especially during crunch, when shit's going really bad, when you write a report up and you're like, look, we've gone through, we've done some time, I've had time to assess what's going on here, and unfortunately, um, it doesn't seem like this tester is particularly good at testing, and um, they've had their training and stuff, but maybe they need another. I don't know. Whatever. You gotta sit down and figure it out, and then you try to and then uh, uh, um, a couple times you'll be like, hey, let's switch up the project. Let's like sit back down and spend some time trying to figure out like how to fix some of these issues, and you talk and such. But there's some people that just bounce the fuck off. They're just not a good fit for it. They don't have the right understanding of it. Slash, they literally just sit there and don't do anything and fall asleep all day. In which case, you kind of have to be like, yeah, this is not going to help the project in the end. And depending on,
But it counts as man hours, dude.
and depending on how busy things are, they'll be like, cool, sounds good, got it, okay, no problem. And then fucking nothing. It's just like, yep, chalk the hours up, don't care, get it done. You know?
So
Um,
when you're in a scum shit fucking garbo place, and you look around and you see the company rats You know, the people you can only describe as a fucking rat. And what do you see them doing? You see them building a tiny little fucking raft out of toothpicks and gum because they can't swim.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And you see them loading that thing up into a nearby river. It's time for you to leave because
I,
they know the tide is coming.
consider your options at the very least, you know. But yeah, it's a fucking. There are some days where, like, the email comes in about which higher ups are gone, and there's just and there's just like a wave of every man for themselves just hits the floor. Everyone's just like, what is happening right now? Like, what? Okay, oh god, like, you know, you're just like, you're searching through your emails to pull out that resume while you're still seated at the fucking test kit. Like, it's
There's a just I don't like I've been in a couple places and the feeling of like walking in and a bunch of people aren't there anymore and this I don't like I don't how to describe it, like there's just a certain weird emotion which is impending dread floating around.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
you're just like, did we hit an iceberg when I was at home?
I mean, whenever people have asked advice about QA and such, I'll always say that, like, it's easier to get started getting into a third party place if you can work your way in towards a first party studio, because they tend to care quite a bit more about the quality of their hires, since they're usually full time and they're going to be fucking directly responsible for the, you know, the reputation of everything they're putting out. And from that better hiring position, it was much more. When I had to create a compliance team, it was much easier to like look through and go like, okay, this person is really good at that. I've seen the way they work on this type of task, and yeah, absolutely. Let me get you build a team, you know, and you can build a fucking a trustworthy group of people to like find that shit, get it done consistently well, and like, and then once you have that, you don't have to worry about like the accountability side, because you know who you're working with and what and how. So it's just a matter of like, give us the time and we'll deliver. And this is where you hear me telling the stories of like the bullshit coming back from the higher ups, you know, where like I'm like, I can do what you're asking me to if you give me the time and the ability to do it, but if you don't give me that, then you're not going to get that product. But like, all of those conversations are predicated on like having a capable team, you know? Very important.
What if instead of giving you what you want, I ask for more than what I'm actually telling you and give you literally nothing?
I mean, look, at that point it doesn't really matter because you're already getting paid. So, you know, and if you're
Yeah,
in
like
and if you're doing your fucking plan, you can ride that out, burn some contracts, make some money, and then like hop, step, jump, fucking parachute out of the burning plane before anything explodes, and you'll be good. So, you know, every man
there's
for
a
themselves.
there's a certain joy to using your work hours to apply for a different job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to work, and my job that they're going to pay me for is searching for a new job because fuck this place.
And then there's like the exact opposite of that, which is like an email pops up and it's a potential contract to work with a company that you really care about the games they make, and you go, holy fuck, we cannot fuck this up. And then just immediately, through sheer force of will and like yelling at whoever needs to be yelled at, it's like, no, you're going to put me on this, and you're going to let me choose who's working on it, and you're going to give me exactly the hours I tell you we need to if you want to keep working with this company, because I know exactly what they're about, you know?
So it's really a genuine shame because I feel like you just latched on to the reason why the video game industry has a particular labor problem, and that is an industry run by people who actually care about the work that they're doing, which is their problem. People at the cracker factory making fucking packaged Ritz crackers are not going to work going, fuck yeah, man, I can't wait to make the best fucking box of crackers in the world. They're saying, no, I want to go to work and do my shift and have nothing go wrong and go home.
Mm-hmm.
So no one can come up to them and go, but don't you really care about the little Jimmy biting into his first saltine cracker and having a one? No, I don't give a fuck. But people who work in video games give a fuck.
Mm.
Don't you want to work at Bethesda? Don't you want to work at Blizzard? Oh, think of all those great games we've made, and you can be part of that history. Blah, 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 blah. Like,
the first time a fighting game came to the office, I was not in a position to schedule meetings, and I scheduled meetings. I made myself very known and got up and went and spoke to people and sat them down and said, listen to me, this is what you need to do. And things went in such a way that it went well enough that the second time a fighting game came into the office, they just went, okay, Woolie, do you want to? Yeah, no problem. You know, I made it clear, this is what I'm about. You're lucky I'm here, I can fucking do this. You know, but you have to listen to what I say. Anyways, so that is the perspective I can offer you on the Cyberpunk story.